So we know this for sure. A lot of pressing questions for the Philadelphia 76ers going into this crucial, massive, pivotal offseason. So coming up on today's Philadelphia 76ers Now, we're going to answer your questions from our loyal subscribers right here on the show. First, can you help us out? And with this show, can we reach 15,000 subscribers? I think we can because we have some of the best viewers all across YouTube. We are 66 people away from that number. And I'm telling you right now, we have you covered every step of the way during the Sixers offseason. News, rumors, analysis, breaking news, signings, NBA draft, free agency. We do it all. So lock us in, hit that sub button. I promise you, you will not regret it. Let's begin here with Robertson355, Chase Sr., and also Chippy. I like Chippy. Do you guys see LeBron James coming to the Sixers and also Jimmy Butler returning to the 76ers if he gets traded? So with the way that you phrase that, I don't think that both LeBron James and Jimmy Butler are going to go to Philadelphia. It would cost too much. It's not realistic. And from a basketball standpoint, the sacrifices that you would need to make for all of those players and Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, too much of a handful for Nick Nurse. Everything would be convoluted, and I don't think that there would be any synergy for the team. And from a cost-controlled standpoint, you're probably going to give out one max contract if you are going to give out a max contract, because there's an avenue in which Philadelphia doesn't get that third star. And then they really try to build that bench, build the rest of that starting five like the Nuggets have done for Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic around Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Here's what Kevin O'Connor had to say about LeBron. Out east, the Philadelphia 76ers inquired about trading for LeBron ahead of February's trade deadline, so clearly Philadelphia would have interest in using its cap space on LeBron this summer. It's worth noting that Bronny James could transfer to Duquesne, an A-10 conference in Pittsburgh, according to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, and LeBron's high school teammate Drew Joyce is the head coach in Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. Is just a short flight. There was also this, which was popular on the Twitter streets last week, that Bronny is looking at Villanova. And if he goes to Villanova, could that sway LeBron to sign with the Sixers so that he can go outside of the city to the main line to check out some Villanova games and watch Bronny in person? Again, I think it's completely unrealistic that LeBron goes from the West Coast, where he's got that production company, where he's involved in Hollywood, where he has a good situation, and comes to Philadelphia. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's going to happen. As for Jimmy Butler, his next team odds, I know that Pat Riley said we're not going to deal him away, but could Butler ask out? Could he demand a trade? And if he does, Philadelphia has a couple of picks this year and a couple of first-round picks in the future, as well as the cap space to give him the contract extension that Jimmy Butler is looking for. Philadelphia, 2-1 to land Jimmy Butler. Pelicans at 4-1. I don't think he'd ever want to go there. Brooklyn Nets at 6-1. I don't see why that would make sense. The Kings 8-1 and the Spurs 12-1, a sneaky team. I guess Philadelphia or bust for Jimmy Butler because he wants to play alongside Joel Embiid, one of his best friends, and he keeps getting disappointed by the likes of Tyler Hero. You're not going to get disappointed by Tyrese Maxey. Butler did cause some stir with his comments that the Celtics would be at home if he was healthy, and the New York Knicks would definitely be at home if he was healthy, which then led Pat Riley to say this: if you're not on the court playing against Boston, not on the court playing against the New York Knicks, you should keep your mouth shut. Now, he didn't say that in an aggressive way. He just kind of said it in a passive way, but either way, could that annoy Jimmy Butler? Total possibility for that. Now we bring on producer Chip to get his thoughts on the subject matter. LeBron, as we've said, is our number one. And then after that, I think you look at a Paul George, a Jimmy Butler, a Brandon Ingram, a Kevin Durant. Some people have brought up Devin Booker, but those other options I think are a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, I do think it's more realistic that the Sixers sign somebody as opposed to trade for somebody, only because, remember, the Sixers have 4 players on the roster right now, and really the only player they truly have is Joel Embiid because Paul Reed is non-guaranteed, rookie council is non-guaranteed, although I'm sure they'll guarantee that and keep him on the roster. And then Jeff Doughton is on a team option, so they don't really have players or salaries to trade for other players. Everything would have to be a sign and trade, which makes it tough because who do you really have? You know, Tobias Harris, DeAnthony Melton, Buddy Hield. Maybe these are some pieces that other teams would want. But if you're trading a Jimmy Butler, when we talk about Kevin Durant, you know, these teams probably want a trade to be centered around a young star. But maybe a team like the Heat, who want to stay in contention, would consider some of those pieces. The Sixers also have some decent picks. They have a 2028 Clippers first, some other first-round pick swaps with the Clippers. Those could be pretty decent picks that maybe teams will value if they're looking towards a rebuild in the future. If I had to pick one between Jimmy and LeBron, which one I think is more realistic, I'd probably swing LeBron only because I have a tough time seeing the Heat agreeing to trade Jimmy back to Philly. But again, we've seen crazier things happen in the NBA offseason. It's a wild time. I mean, we saw with Dame last year, so who knows? We'll see what happens.
I could see, and you think a trade is unlikely, the Pelicans wanting to trade Brandon Ingram. They bench him at the end of the year, bench him in the playoffs. He struggled a little bit. Does that roster become too congested with him? And then you saw Zion Williamson finally staying healthy for the regular season, taking that leap. Is that a trade that could maybe be realistic? Logan Mack 814, is Paul George going to come to Philadelphia? I think it's wise for him to test the waters and see what types of offers he could land in free agency. The Clippers up to this point have been timid in trying to give him a contract extension. They haven't. If Philadelphia gives him a contract extension and they say, you could play alongside Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid, we have this plan to manage the games played and the minutes of Joel Embiid. So a lot of nights you could be the number 1 or 2 option alongside Tyrese Maxey. Then come playoff time, you've been with the franchise that has been snake bitten. I know you're going to another team that's been snake bitten too, but I think the future of Philadelphia is a lot more bright than the future of the Clippers. Plus, Kawhi Leonard has been injured so much, more so than Joel Embiid. And Philadelphia has more ability to improve the roster around PG, Tyrese Maxey, and Embiid. Here's what Shams had to say about the Paul George situation. This Clippers team fully intends to keep this group together as they want to bring back Paul George as a free agent or give him an extension, but they have not been able to reach an agreement with Paul George. They've made multiple contract offers below the max. They have not been able to reach a deal, so they're going to keep trying, and we'll see if he tests free agency. I think he should test it. And if he does, Philadelphia should set up a meeting with him. I know he's had some playoff duds, but this is a player who can get a bucket from anywhere, would be a much better third option than Tobias Harris. And think about, yes, these older players that people are complaining about, but think about these options over Tobias Harris and how much better it makes you, worth somewhere in the neighborhood of the same price tag.
We've talked about it. Could you imagine if Paul George was in place of Tobias Harris in the Knicks series? The Sixers win that series. And look, I understand, Morey came out and said we want a wing, which Paul George fits that mold, who has success in the playoffs. And Paul George doesn't have the best track record in the playoffs, but he just offers such a more versatile skill set and two-way ability than any wing the Sixers truly have, just at a higher level than anybody on that roster. I think it's going to come down to one, is he only going to accept a max? Is any other team out there, including the Clippers, going to offer him a max? I don't think the Clippers will. Is there another team out there that could throw that to him? I think Morey would be willing to throw Paul George the max. And then, is Paul George going to be willing to do what it takes to win a championship? And by that I mean, is he going to be fine and comfortable with being a third option? Now, again, Embiid probably guaranteed to miss some time. He does every year. So in those instances, then you have a guy who can step up and be the second option. I even think Paul George at the end of games, you can put the ball in his hands. He can go get you a bucket when you need one. He can create off the dribble, which the Sixers have not had in Tobias Harris. If I'm Morey, I go out there, I see what the offers sort of are for Paul George, and if you swing and miss on a LeBron, if you can't make a big trade for a Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler, I'd rather have Paul George and Brandon Ingram, I think. I don't think Brandon Ingram has really showed to have much of a playoff track record. So Paul George, I'm all about it, and seems like it, maybe more likely than some people might believe right now.
PG, Maxey, Embiid. And can you imagine Paul George guarding Jalen Brunson? I don't think Brunson would have ended the series with those consecutive 40-point games. Just saying. The new DK Sports and Gaming. Which role players should the 76ers target in NBA free agency? Role player targets that we like, Malik Monk is at the top of my list. Just a fast, twitchy, good athlete, can move swiftly with the ball in his hands, is a flamethrower from distance, a reliable three-point target. He is so far above all these other role player targets. Now, outside of Malik Monk, Gary Trent Jr., Malik Beasley, Tyus Jones, Gary Harris, Royce O'Neal, Obi Toppin, Derek Jones, Chris Dunn, Goga Badatsi. Tyus Jones as a backup point guard, certainly intriguing too, but I also like Campaign and Kyle Lowry as backup options to Tyrese Maxey, who can also play off-ball alongside Maxey. And then as far as Sixers role player targets go, again, Kyle Lowry, Campaign, Nick Batum, Kelly Oubre. I'd like to bring them all back. We'll see about Paul Reed. Let's ask you this. This will be our poll question for today's show. Who is your number one free agent target for the Philadelphia 76ers? In addition to this being the poll question, this will be the pinned comment. So make sure you go on down and drop that name. Today's show is sponsored by Prize Picks, by the way. Daily and easy and exciting daily fantasy sports. You pick two or more players, you choose more or less on the projected stats, and you can win up to 25 times your money. Also, a $100 deposit match available at prizepicks.com/CLNS. We have some series picks that we like, with Cavs and Celtics getting underway. Donovan Mitchell, more than 112.5 points. This is up to Game 4, by the way. And then with Mavs Thunder getting underway, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, more than 23 dimes. And then Chet Holmgren, more than 37 rebounds. So you can do a bunch of different things with the Prize Picks app. You can combine sports. You can take a look at futures. You can do series selections like we just did, game-by-game picks. Win big money. Withdraw your winnings. Pick more, pick less, pick Prize Picks. $100 deposit match available at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Raymond Martin. If it's Ramon Martin, hopefully I got it right, my man. What player is currently on the team should they bring back? With that previous question before we went to Prize Picks, I did throw out a couple of in-house options that I think the Sixers should retain, and I didn't expand on that for the reason of getting to this question here. Kyle Lowry, Campaign, Nick Batum, Kelly Oubre. Two veterans here who you want in the foxhole with you, who could play on ball or off ball with or without Tyrese Maxey. They showed no fear in the NBA playoffs. I love that from them, and they showed that they are capable. Nick Batum, stretch four who can play with Embiid or without Embiid, quick trigger, big game experience. Kelly Oubre gives you a really good athlete on both ends of the floor. If the price is right, maybe Buddy Hield, but I think the writing is on the wall because Daryl Morey said he didn't fit in as well as I thought he was going to. DeAnthony Melton might be too expensive, also has the back injury. So those are some current roster options before they hit free agency that you could look to bring back. Barry, will Tobias Harris be the starting forward? If not, who will be? My man. If Tobias Harris comes back to this team, I might not be able to watch the Sixers next year. It was an excruciatingly painful and frustrating and maddening 5.5 years of the Tobias Harris experience, especially when he's making $36 million. And in Game 6 of the NBA playoffs, he takes 2 shots. Goes 0 of 2. 0 for no points. A classic end of the Tobias Harris era. Now, Daryl Morey did say at the end of season press conference that he thinks that he can be a good player on a championship team. Daryl, if you do it, I'm out. Wing targets to replace him, though, there are upgrades, and the upgrades are plentiful, much more dynamic, and much better. LeBron, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, and then Lauri Markkanen. Although the Jazz asking price, it is going to be very, very steep. Isaac, this offseason, the 76ers better pick up another big man. I agree. The backup center spot behind Joel Embiid has been a problem for a long time. And it's a difficult position to get in the NBA. It is. You look across all of their 29 teams, there are not a lot of quality backup bigs. Big man options, though. Andre Drummond, good rebounder, rim protector, lob threat. Isaiah Hartenstein, I think the Knicks look to bring him back. Jonas Valanciunas, Goga Bitadze, Mason Plumlee. Let me throw a name out there. Steven Adams, if he could stay healthy. Those are options currently in the NBA. Sixers also have the 16th overall pick. I've talked myself into Zach Edey a little bit. I think that he can give you a productive 10 to 15 minutes a night. Now, here's the issue. Teams are going to put him in a turnstile on drop coverage and in the pick and roll because he's pretty slow laterally. But he's difficult to defend. He has a decent touch from 15 feet with the free throw stroke. Can he develop a little bit of an elbow and baseline jumper? And you know, at that height and that size, he's going to be able to protect the rim at least a little bit. But certainly a problem defensively. I'm intrigued, though. User, Ingram, we always get certain players at the end of their career. No Paul George, no Jimmy Butler. If you want to go younger player, you go Brandon Ingram. 26 years old, I think he can be had for a decent price as far as a trade goes. This past year for New Orleans, almost 21 points per game, 49% from the floor, 35.5% from three. He's not scared to chuck it like Tobias Harris sometimes is. I wonder how a third player, though, fits alongside Maxey and Embiid, because you want to see Maxey and Embiid take shots. Brandon Ingram sometimes gets a little bit passive, but he can certainly get to his shot at all three levels and can hit contested shots. Want to see a little bit more efficiency from the three-point stroke. His career playoff stats, he's been pretty productive. In the NBA playoffs, too, 10 games played, so smaller sample size, only a couple of series for him. 22 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 5 dimes, 43% from the field, and then 37% from three-point range. Chip, have you talked yourself into Brandon Ingram, because the fan base is certainly split?
Yeah, and the fan base seems very split between Brandon Ingram or Paul George or some of these other guys. You know, I used to be a big Brandon Ingram guy, actually, when he first got to New Orleans, when he was traded from the Lakers. But I don't know, man. I'm just not as big of a Brandon Ingram guy anymore. To me, you know, he can definitely create his own shot. He has that ability in the mid-range, of course. Very long. He can get to the rim. But to me, he has injury concerns. I mean, he missed a good chunk of the end of this season, came back just before the playoffs, and struggled a little bit. But, yeah. I mean, we saw Brandon Ingram getting absolutely clamped by Lou Dort in the playoffs. It was very, very bad for him.
Impressive by Dort, yeah.
Yeah, he was in the torture chamber. It was very, very bad. To me, you know, if that's the best you can do, you know, if you can't get LeBron, you can't get KD, Jimmy's not available for trade, Paul George goes back to the Clippers, you know, I don't think you'd have to give Brandon Ingram the max. So in that instance, you could get Ingram and then get a couple other complementary pieces. I'm just not 100% sold on, one, his catch-and-shoot three-point ability, necessarily his fit with Embiid and Maxey. I have to see it before I'm sold on it. I know some of the fan base is into it, so maybe I could be convinced, but right now I'm just not quite there on Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I've seen some people say the Sixers can right their wrongs. They should have taken B.I. instead of Ben Simmons. Certainly an interesting debate to look back on. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, and look, like, is he the best player that you can potentially get? No. But if you get that best player, can you build up the roster? around the big three as much? No. And if you get Ingram, he might not be the best, but can you get some of those other pieces, as Chip noted? That's interesting. Caleb Johnson. Should we start to see Maxey as the first option and Joel as a second? We saw it in Game 5. We saw it in moments of this playoff series against the Knicks where you need that player who can create his own shot. Embiid cannot create his own shot, especially when he gets double-teamed. Maxey's hard to double-team because he can shake that double-team, and he can score from all three levels, where Embiid consistently cannot. So, yeah, I think as we progress in this era of Maxey and Embiid, the two-man game, beautiful, right? Now you want to see if Maxey at moments can be that first option and the go-to option, kind of like Jamal Murray at times, has become the number one option alongside Jokic. And I throw those pairings out there because they're very similar with very similar games. If you're still rocking with this, give me a real one. Thanks to all the questions that came in throughout this mailbag segment. It's always a blast to chop it up with everybody, and we'll catch you next time here on the show.